Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started right away. We are going to learn about caves tonight. That's exciting. We have Vona from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Vona, I'm going to let you introduce yourself more, especially if it's me. All right. Thank you.
No worries. Yep, that sounds great. Okay. Okay, well, hey, everybody. My name is Vona Kuczynska. I'm a biologist with the Fish and Wildlife Service. I work out of the Missouri field office. And because you guys are master naturalists, you probably know this already, but I sometimes feel like I need to say it, that we are not the Missouri Department of Conservation. That is usually, people think of us as the Department of Conservation, which is a state agency. We are a federal agency. And so our funding comes from the Department of Interior, and our job is to administer the Endangered Species Act. So our role is really surrounding the endangered species that are listed federally, even though some of them might occur only in Missouri, but like it could be species anywhere. Just generally about me, I've been a wildlife biologist for about 18 years. Most of that has been studying, my experience has been studying bats. Some of it's definitely working with birds. I feel like most biologists at some point or another have dipped into birds for a while. And my job at the Fish and Wildlife Service is to recover endangered species. And so if a species gets listed and gets put on the Endangered Species Act, it gets assigned an office, and within the office of biologist, and it's your job to try to keep it from going extinct, which is not like, you don't go to sleep very well at night for that reason, for a lot of nights. And so in my position, because I'm a bat biologist, I have a lot of endangered bats that are under me that I oversee, such as the gray bat. And I guess because the shoe fits, because I work in caves, I was not that long ago given a cave dwelling fish. So I'm learning about fish now, which I know nothing about fish. So that was, I mean, like nothing. I couldn't even like tell you like the anatomy of a fish, but like, it's okay. I'll get there. But then within bats, my interest is really bioacoustics. And so I spent a lot of time looking at echolocation calls from bats and helping people understand and teaching people how to review sonograms and how to identify bats from their echolocation, which is a less intrusive method than going out and handling bats and stressing bats out in caves or with mist nets. And so that's what eats a lot of my lunch. Somebody brought up bush honeysuckle in the chat I saw. So I just thought I would mention, I am a UMSL graduate. That's where I went to grad school. And my thesis was actually on how bush honeysuckle affects bat activity. And so the outcome of my thesis was showing that when bush honeysuckle moves in and it takes over native understories and fills them with so much clutter because it just changes the structure of forests, it prevents bats from wanting to go into the forest understory and eat there. And so it's not only reducing insect diversity and biomass, it's also actually like preventing them from being able to fly through those spaces. And so a lot of my sites were like Queenie, Castlewood, Weldon Springs, Babbler. So I had a really fun time doing that work. So this presentation it's bat focused, it's cave focused, it's kind of all these things. We're going to talk about animals that live in caves, so it's not going to be just about like, it's certainly not like all geology of caves, but I did want to just at least start with introducing to somebody maybe on the call who doesn't know what an actual cave is. Because it's kind of disputed actually what a cave is, but generally it's considered a natural opening in the ground. Usually you want it to be beyond the zone of light. So if it's just like a little dip into a bluff, it's not a cave. You have to be able to get beyond the zone of light. And you should be able, it should allow for the entry by a single person and crawling counts. So some of them are really tight squeezes, like you can see in the picture there, or you're just gonna get your body in. And then if you did and you're beyond the zone of light, you'd be like, that's a cave. And so there's a lot of competition around this. between states, because we're called the cave state, but we don't actually have the most caves in the country, and we can during a Q&A, if anybody wants to talk about that, we can. But it's kind of a fascinating thing that there's like, just like bird people have like their bird lists, there's like whole societies that really want to find caves and have more caves than other states. And babies, like I brought this up once too, like I was like, can you count putting a baby into a cave? If a baby fits, does that count? Because my daughter's only 3. And so I did not get a response. I think I got an eye roll. So, but like if we wanted to get ahead of other states, I feel like we could use that loophole. So just like generally, probably not news to many of you. You've probably been to show caves. If you've been in Missouri, you've probably heard us 1,000 times on cave tours. But in Missouri, caves are primarily made from limestone or dolomite bedrock, which is fairly easily dissolved by rainwater, by rain. And so what usually happens is water will collect, and water will come down, rain will come down, it will mix with carbon dioxide, it will create a very gentle, a very gentle acidic environment that will wear away at the rock, and it will be a solution cave. It will be filled with water, and over time that cavity will widen and lengthen, and little by little create these structures below ground. And as those structures permeate down, the water will continue to go down, and it'll create cavities that are open that people can access at that point. This is happening obviously over a very, very long period of time. And there are lots of caves still in Missouri that are going through this process and continuing to go through that process. And typically, once that water comes down and out of these cave systems, and now they're void of water and they're open, you'll start to see really cool things happening, like these structures and formations, like some of them are called dripstone. These are soda straws, shown in the picture on the left, and stalactites on the right. There's basically what's happening is that water is dripping down. It's pulling some of that soil from the ground with it. And when the water evaporates, it leaves behind that mineral, and it creates these soda straws that are inside. They're empty. They actually look like a straw, but eventually they clog up and they start to look more like the picture on the right, where they just become kind of these hanging blobs, these stalactites. So here's some examples of really cool dripstones in Missouri. Some of them are called aragonites and helictites. And so these are different structures that can form during that soda straw process. And what's really interesting is that people don't know exactly why they can look like them. Like, so like the helictites, you can see that they're kind of growing in all different directions. And gravity seems to not be affecting them at all with how they're dripping. And so there's some theories about that structure and how that can happen. We won't get into it, but they can be really interesting to find in a cave. We're always looking for them. These are obviously like exemplary, really cool examples that I'm showing you here that are not super common, but you can find, especially helictites, you can find in a lot of caves. So with some time, once these structures form and the minerals continue to come down, they will eventually drip down onto the ground, and they will combine with the top ones, and they'll create columns. So here I'm on the left-hand side in a picture of one that has built in one of the caves that we typically visit. And sometimes they're really not, I mean, they're interesting, they're not that pretty, and some of them are just gorgeous. So if you see the one on the right in Mystery Cave in Perry County, that one is just really one of the best ones I've ever seen, a beautiful example of those. Another really interesting structure that can form in caves are flowstones and rimstones, which is where that water is not flowing from the top via soda straws, it's coming down the sides of the walls and creating these beautiful flowstones. And then sometimes they get clogged up, or like they form sort of in the middle of them, and they actually create really interesting wildlife habitats because the water will pull inside of them. So you can see on the right-hand side, you can see some salamander larvae that get deposited, well, the eggs get deposited there. And so then you can find them as you're walking around. We're always looking for wildlife within them, and they're fairly common. I don't know how many of you guys enter caves, but that's not too unusual to see. So, as I was saying earlier, Missouri is considered the cave state. And on this map, it's just a map showing you of the different types of rocks. And you can see why Missouri is called a cave state, even though we don't have the most caves. But the lower half of Missouri has the perfect geology for cave formation. This is kind of a heat map of where caves in Missouri exist. And so since you guys are from St. Louis County, and I gave this presentation before in St. Louis County, I actually put it up here. St. Louis County has 157 caves. And then surrounding counties have, you can see Jeff County has 211. Perry County has one of the most. I think it's actually Shannon County, but just think about it, like it has 700 caves in one county. Not all of them are really, really big. Like I was doing the math, trying to figure out just outside of St. Louis, within an hour and a half of St. Louis, there are over 1,000 caves. So that's pretty neat. And then something else that most people overlook, I don't, because bats love mines, that on top of all the caves that we have in Missouri, we have countless mines that have the feel and the resemblance of caves and underground quarries. So this is Limekiln Mine in Hannibal, Missouri. Have you guys ever heard of this mine by any chance? Has anybody been up to Sedalis Nature Preserve? Nobody in here. Okay. So there's a preserve, and I'll introduce it a little bit more later, but this is a place where there's over 250,000 bats, endangered bats, roosting in this one mine. And so one of the things I'm studying right now is how microclimates differ between mines and caves, and why these bats love this mine. And so it's still a mystery to us, but I think we have some good ideas for why. There's just, if you guys are curious, cave ownership in Missouri, this is as of like 2025. So I know we're over 8,000 caves at this point, but I couldn't get any slides together for this, but there's over 8,000 caves in Missouri right now, but the pattern still holds that most of them, almost 3/4 of them, are in private hands. And between like all of these other agencies, we have just a few of them. We have a lot of the really important ones that have wildlife in them, but we certainly don't own, or the public doesn't own, a lot of those caves. We work with a lot of private landowners. We have a lot of conservation easements on the more important sites that are still in private hands, and a lot of them are in really good private hands. But then sometimes things do happen, like some caves become show caves, and bats abandon those sites, and there's really not a whole lot that we can do unless they're federally listed. So that's sometimes hard to see, and we've seen it happen. But on the whole, private landowners are typically pretty responsible and very proud of their caves, and they do not want people coming and going and trashing their caves, which is always a good thing. I've been in a lot of caves now because of my job. Before this job, I was actually an assistant bat biologist with Department of Conservation, and so I got to go to a lot of caves. And if any of you are cavers, you know this. Like, no two caves are alike. They're all so different, and a lot of that has to do with their openings, the number of openings they have, or how they're situated, whether they're situated in a bluff or whether they're connected to surface habitat, whether there's water flowing through them. the opening has a huge effect on the kind of life that's inside. And so on the left-hand side in that picture, this is Rocheport Cave. It's really close to my house, about 15 minutes away. That opening is huge. And so there's a lot of light coming in. There's a lot of the ambient temperature is coming and going out of that cave system regularly, as is humidity. Whereas if you have a much smaller opening, kind of like on the right in the Running Bull Cave in Perry County, that is not allowing a lot of air and temperature change to happen on a regular basis, especially it won't go deeper into the cave system unless there's another opening somewhere that's pulling air in. So caves, let me just turn this off. There we go. Caves can be wet or dry. And, you know, most of the time we're not wearing cave suits when we go in, but there are certainly some caves where you need one. And that water is cold. Most of our surveys are during the hibernation season. And when bats are hibernating, that's when they're in caves. And so this is just a video of like a typical condition as we're walking through cave systems. So there's like everything, people like to dissect them into zones and give things names. And caves generally have these 4 zones, or maybe you can say 5 zones. There's always the entrance, especially if you only have one opening. Beyond that, it's just the light area, where I'm standing in the photo that's on the right-hand side, you can see where the light area is, because you should be able to read a book in that area. You wouldn't need a headlamp. Beyond that is the twilight zone, where things are becoming more dark. And then you have the transition zone between the place where you would definitely need a headlamp on. It's getting much darker and hard to see. And then you have the deep zone, which is just complete darkness, where you know, you're like usually deep into the cave system. You could be a mile in, you could be 29 miles in. These caves have various lengths. And because of that, again, like, it's really important as we talk about things and coming up, is that it really affects the ambient temperature and humidity, drives the life that's in these caves, and these openings are a huge part of that for what can use it. So that picture on the right is, again, Rocheport Cave. This cave has the biggest grayback colony of any cave in Missouri. And the bats there have to move way further back. Like, they hang out in the kind of the light and the twilight zone that's in this picture. The moms have pups in the early June. But then as the summer gets really hot, like almost to 100, they don't want to be there anymore. It's too hot. It's too humid. They hate it. So they go way back into the transition and the deep zone of the cave, which has a lot more stable temperatures, and it's a lot colder, and they love that. So they're always responding to what's happening at the opening of the cave. So like along this gradient of the cave, there's also a really big change in the number of what nutrients exist. Like, obviously at the entrance, you're going to have animals walking up to it. You're going to have deer, you're going to have raccoons, you're going to have coyotes, you're going to have plants. So there's going to be a lot of life happening at the entrance. But as you get deeper and deeper into the zone, you're going to see fewer and fewer animals. Raccoons, I just still don't understand these animals and how they do it. But we see them like deep in caves, miles in, and we'll see their footprints all over the place. They're catching fish somehow. They amaze me. And we've always find their feces. So this is Kyle. He's the assistant bat biologist for MDC. And then here's some raccoon scat in this picture that has fungus growing on it. And this is deep in the cave. And so even though most of the life is happening sort of on the entrance area and the light and the twilight zones, you still see some nutrient inputs deeper and deeper into these caves. And then some animals, like bats, are willing to tolerate these deeper zones, like the deep zone and transition zone, because it offers something to them that they want, such as like a stable climate. They don't have to deal with hot temperatures. They don't have to deal with predators as much, although we do see raccoons eating a lot of bats. But in general, especially if the ceilings are really high, they're safe. They're away from places where they can be seen by wildlife, like cats, especially. We see a lot of feral cats eating bats. But many animals take advantage of these stable environments that are deeper into the zone, and they have to develop specialized skills or specialized adaptations, physiological adaptations, physical adaptations to be able to live in them. So obviously bats are like the best example, where they can take advantage of this type of the deep zones and the transition zones. Another critter that's not a bat is something that's the fish that I told you guys about that I'm in charge of. I work with a professor with University of Missouri. His name is Mickey Tobler. He's a fish guy. Thank goodness I have like somebody who can teach me things about fish. But he's studying this fish with us, doing a genetic work. It's called the grotoscopin. It's only in 5 cave systems in Perry County and nowhere else on the planet. And it's very threatened by poor water quality. There's a lot of impaired stream. There's an impaired stream in that county, and a lot of that runoff has E. coli and all kinds of farm runoff that's affecting this fish. And people dump things in the sinkholes, all kinds of chemical waste. And so I'm trying really hard to work with that county. They've done a lot of really good things to help this fish. It's been kind of an amazing partnership. But when we're in these cave systems and we're studying them, we find that some of them have eyes and then some have no eyes. And so we think, and Mickey's the geneticist, but he thinks they're going through this evolutionary adaptation. They're like in that process of evolving the loss of eyes because they don't need them, because they're in these deep caves, they're in these deep zones where they don't need eyes. And so here's a video on the right-hand side. You can kind of see that this fish is eyeless. And that's an adult fish that's, I don't know how old, we don't know how old they actually get. We're trying to figure that out, but probably 4 or 5 years old. And then you have one here in the center, which has eyes. It's the craziest thing. We're working on that. We have a funding coming in where we're trying to answer some of the questions related to that. Another Missouri species are these snails, and they have totally lost pigmentation. They are clear. We see them in caves a lot. So they have lost most or all of their pigmentation. This one on the right is a really interesting species. It's listed, it's federally endangered. It's in one cave in all of Missouri in Taney County in Tumbling Creek Cave. And it's so small. It's the smallest endangered species that's ever been listed. It's 2 millimeters in size. And when we're doing these surveys, I can't tell if I'm looking at a grain of sand or if I'm looking at a snail. So I have to bring a lens. And so this is like a really tough one. It's doing really poorly. We only count like 50 of them at a time. We don't know what threats are acting on it. The recharge area around it is protected. And yet the species is not doing very well. There's only a few left, but it is a great example of a cave obligate that you can see that's lost all of its pigmentation. Another one where you can see a loss of eyes and pigmentation. So you have a cave salamander on the left, which is far less adapted, obviously, than the cave obligate grotto salamander. So here's an example of that where it's just completely lost its pigment. It's pale, and you can kind of see the big difference in their eyes between the one on the left and one on the right. So they're pretty much gone. I don't even think they're doing anything at that point, even though there's like a bit of a fragment left. It's really unlikely. I've been told, I'm not a salamander expert, that they're no longer functional. Okay, I think this might be one of the last ones. I won't give you too many examples of this, but I just think it's so fascinating. But here's another one, which are flatworms that we find in caves all the time. If you flip a rock, if you're in a cave, you will probably find flatworms. They're kind of fun to look at. But so this is just an example of 3 species. Some of them are still undescribed, and there's people who really geek out about this. But there's multiple species, and they're all very cave adapted, very faint, and no pigment, no eye spots. Okay, all right. There's one more maybe, but this is a just keep throwing examples out here. This is me in the standing next to a pile of bat guano. So this is a gray bat colony. Gray bats roost in caves in the summer, so they're eating and they're pooping constantly. As a matter of fact, one of the master naturalists here in Boone County have come with me to some of these caves to help me with a study. And one of them fell into a giant pile of guano. And I felt really, like, just totally fell into it. I felt really bad, but she's okay. I mean,
No.
she wanted to come back. Like, she posted about it on Facebook, and every year she gets like the reminder. She's like, it's been 3 years since I fell in the guano. And I'm like, oh my God. But so this is grayback guano. It's, it's insects, right? That's what it is. They're eating insects. And so it's food for other animals. And so a lot of times when we're looking in these piles, and in that pile specifically, we find guano pseudoscorpions. They're very small. They're hard to see. But you can find all kinds of critters that are reliant on this guano for life. And I didn't bring this up yet. I wanted to show you this picture first, but we think that maybe the reason that cave snail that I showed you, that really tiny one, is winking out is because it's relying on the nutrient loads from grayback guano to wash down the stream where they live. And those gray bats have moved to a different part of the cave. And so now there's not enough nutrient input in the water, and there's not enough biofilm being produced. And they don't have anything to eat, is what we think. We don't know, but this is our hypothesis. And then, of course, I have to mention bats, right? So they're cave adapted in that they can hibernate, and they don't have to, like birds, they don't have to fly to South America or warmer parts of the country. They decided they can stay in a very stable climate in caves. Typically, like, cave climates are the average temperature of a place. So if you took the average temperature every single day over an entire year and you averaged it, that's typically the cave temperature that's in the deep zone of a cave. And so in Missouri, around our latitude, that's about 57 degrees. So if you go further north in Missouri, it's going to be like 55 degrees. And if you go way south, it'll be a little bit warmer. But that's good enough for these bats. It's warm enough for them. They're happy to stay and basically not eat for 6 months and live off their body fat, which just blows my mind. I can't even make it like 3 hours without eating. And so this is I love this photo. This is the Ozark big-eared bat. Fitting name, right? But they're just beautiful. They're a beautiful bat with these huge ears. And we'll talk about them in just a second, but I just love that picture. So I'm gonna divert for just a second, zoom out to tell you guys that even though this is a cave presentation and the bats are gonna come up, a common misconception about bats is that bats live in caves and that bats live in caves year round. They don't, not all of them. There are migratory tree bats. So we have 5 species of bats. These are the ones on the left that rarely or never use caves unless they got lost in them. And they still use the strategy to leave and go someplace else that's warmer for the winter, or they hibernate under leaf litter. So I don't know how many of you guys do prescribed burns. I'm assuming some of you have done that. I hear stories all the time about people who flush up red bats from under the leaf litter as they're doing prescribed burns. So they will never, ever, ever use caves. We have actually seen red bats by accident enter caves. We don't know why they're coming in. Maybe they're trying to socialize, but they actually are really poor at navigating through these caves, and they get lost and then they die. So there's like one cave in Missouri where there are piles of bones from this bat, from this type of bat, because they go into this cave system and they can't figure out how to navigate back out. It's the biggest mystery. Then we have seasonal cave roosting bats. So these are bats that hibernate and they overwinter in Missouri, they overwinter in the Midwest, but during the summertime, they leave and they go elsewhere for the summertime. And so usually they're under in trees, right? They're under like bark of dead standing trees or under shagbark hickory shingles or big white oak shingles, but they're not in caves at all. And then there's bats that are in caves year round, but there's only 2 species that do that. So like very few bats are actually in caves year round. And these are bats that use caves all winter, but they switch where they are because they want really warm caves that trap heat in the summertime, or they want really cold caves in the winter. So those are, you hear just some examples of those species of these seasonal cave roosting bats. So Indiana bat, they're endangered. Little brown bat is being considered where they used to be listed, because white nose syndrome is affecting them. Do you guys know what white nose syndrome is generally? No? Okay. It's a fungus that grows on their noses and on their skin. It was brought over from Europe. And it's existed in Europe for very, very long time. The bats there are totally adapted to it. They have no response to this fungus. But somehow this fungus made its way over to the United States. And it first was detected in New York, and then it just kept spreading and spreading and spreading. And now it's found all the way on the West Coast. So it's all over the US. It hasn't hit every single county, but it's because the bats are moving it around and people are moving it around from cave to cave. It's in every county, and it affects some species more than others. And so little brown bats in particular, and this tricolor bat here are the 2 species that, actually northern long-eared bat, the one in the middle, have been massively affected by this fungus. And we go into caves and barely ever see these bats anymore. We used to see thousands and thousands of northern long-eared bats in caves. We visit the same caves on the same system every other year. And so we know it's an actual drop, not related to like not visiting these frequently enough or visiting other sites. And now I think we counted 2 northern long-eared bats in the whole state during winter hibernaculum surveys. So we're going from thousands to 2, where they're basically extirpated. And it's all because of this fungus. And then there's other species that are in these same caves with these species that are getting completely wiped out, and they are totally unaffected. So Indiana bat, which is endangered, is not affected at all. Big brown bats are semi-affected, but there seems to have been some selection that happened where some of the ones that were going to be affected, those genes are basically out now, and they have the survivors that seem to be less affected. We are seeing a total incline, and the population is rebounding for that species. It's crazy to see this, like within my lifetime, within just like a 10-year period, seeing these like huge dips. And then within just a few years, seeing this, like the selection pressure so strong that they're regaining and coming back up pretty quickly. All of these bats have only 1 to 2 pups per year, depending on the species. And so it's still going to take them a long time to rebound. They're not like mice where they have tons and tons of young. They only have like 1 pup per year, and a lot of them don't even make it. So we're seeing that recovery, and I'm probably making it sound better than it is, but we are definitely seeing it, but it's going to take some time. So that's that cutie patootie on the left-hand side. That's the Ozark big-eared bat. That's the range shown in that map in the lower right-hand corner. So this bat is actually extirpated from Missouri. We have never seen it in like the last 15 years. They still exist in Oklahoma. But like, I'm actually trying to find them this year. I was able to secure like a little grant to have somebody go looking in caves for them and put out bat detectors for them to see if we can find them, because I think maybe they are present, but we're not looking hard enough for them to know. But they're in caves year round, and so are gray bats. So that's the species on the right hand side that I'm in charge of recovering for the whole country. They're in like 15 states. But those are again the bats that are in caves year round, and they switch roosts. So they're in a different cave in the winter, and then they're in a cave again in the summer. They're really social, like they all hang out together. And gray bats in particular, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Fern Cave in Alabama, but that cave has over 1 million of them in one cave. So you can just imagine the guano piles in there. They're I don't want to go. I get invited all the time to go. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. and neither one of them are susceptible to white nose syndrome. So gray bats in particular are recovering like really well. I wrote a 5-year review. Every 5 years, the Fish and Wildlife Service has to write a review about how a species is doing to see whether it's like improving or declining or stable. And gray bats are doing so well that we're trying to we're going to try to delist them, which is amazing. Like recovery actually working. And I'll tell you more about how they've recovered and what we did in just a little bit. So here is an example of a great bat cave. This is Coffin Cave. It's near Lebanon, Missouri. We have 4 major hibernacula for gray bats in the state. All those little black dots are bats. And so we think from this year that there's about 750,000 bats in this cave. And this is the opening here in that little picture on the side. I was actually pregnant when I was going down into that, and it's just terrifying. I'm really afraid of heights. And I was doing my labor breathing exercises as I was going down because it's like a 80-foot drop. It's terrifying. But it's amazing. It's a beautiful cave. And we try to actually estimate the number of bats that are in these caves from images. Like we take lots of pictures in a very standardized way. And then we do surface area calculations, and then we go back every certain number of years, and then we try again. And that's how we estimate if the bats are doing well, if they're recovering, if their numbers are growing or not. So that's the old NDC state bat biologist. He was doing that there. Of course, like we have to mention, like how can I not mention that bats are really important? I would say it's debatable whether bats actually eat mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are really tiny. Echolocation, like if you do the physics of sound and whether those frequencies can actually pick up a mosquito or whether that sound wave will move directly through it because it's so tiny, is highly debatable. There are studies, like dietary studies, that show that like yes, they're like sometimes found, but like honestly, it's not something I tell people that is like common. Like I know people are like all the time tell me, oh my God, we used to have bats and now we don't, and we have all these mosquitoes. And I'm like, maybe, but probably there's something else going on, because if there were moths around, why would you go for a mosquito? Like you would have to spend so much more energy and time looking for mosquitoes if you can eat a nice fat moth. So more often than not, what we find in pellets is moths, beetles, all types of insects that are much, much larger than mosquito. Now you guys can go ahead and keep telling people lies. Like, I don't care, but it's not like it's for the best, right? But because you're like an educated group, I'll tell you the honest truth here. But what you can also tell people is like they eat a variety of insects, right? They eat so many crop damaging insects. And I found this somewhere on it was an MDC paper where showing that bats contribute, it varies year to year and all these things, but somewhere between $4 and $53 billion annually in agriculture, and almost 100 million per year in Missouri. And there's lots of work that's been done showing that when white nose came through and killed all those bats, then now farmers are applying more insecticides on their fields because bats aren't doing the job for them. So obviously that's bad, right? Like the price of food is going to go up because they're applying more chemicals. It's not great for your health. So overall, like bats, even though maybe they're not eating mosquitoes, they play a major role in keeping us healthy and in lowering food costs. I assume everybody knows this, but just in case, no bats, no tequila, right? Because they pollinate agave plants, and they have to. And so that obviously no agave, no tequila. So they're very, very important for that reason as well. If you like margaritas. So we kind of, another thing people always ask about, so this is a slide I like to bring up, is rabies. It's very hard for me when I hear people that, oh, there's a bat in my house. So now we have to kill the bat, and like rabies is spread by blood to blood or blood to saliva or saliva to saliva contact. If you didn't touch a bat, you didn't get bit by a bat, you cannot get rabies. Now, obviously, if you're sleeping in a house and you don't know what happened, and if you have marks on your body, yeah, of course you should go. But generally, like I do tell people, it's half of 1% of wild populations of bats that are part of wild populations have rabies. We know this because we look at bats that get hit by wind turbines, right? It's so biased. If you take bats that are acting abnormally and you take those for testing, like, yeah, of course, a bunch of those are going to come back as having rabies because they're active during the daytime and you were suspicious of it. But if you take bats that got whacked by a wind turbine that are just totally behaving normally in the wild, we know that those bats have really, really, really low prevalence of rabies. One thing to actually really do worry about when you go into a cave is histoplasmosis. So here's a guano pile. In that photo, I'm wearing a mask. You can see that. Like anytime I go into grayback caves where there's a lot of guano, I wear a mask because I don't want to get histoplasmosis. I don't want my lungs to be affected. I don't want to be on antibiotics. It is treatable, but it's not fun. Another disease that we have in Missouri is amphibian chytrid fungus. And so that's just cave related, not bat related. That MDC is spending a lot of time focusing on this, sampling animals in caves and outside of caves. And they do see die-offs, but I don't know enough about it to really comment. Maybe you guys have had speakers on this topic, but I don't know very much. And then, of course, I mentioned white nose syndrome already, and this is what it looks like on the bat when it's in full force. They get this white muzzle on their face, their ears, and their skin membrane will start to look white, and this fungus is growing, and it has a white appearance to it. A lot of those bats do not make it. So it's a little late for this, but it's still probably a good idea to decontaminate. If you go in caves, you should really boil your clothes or spray it with isopropyl or some kind of alcohol that could reduce the spread of white nose syndrome or chytrid fungus. Generally, goes without saying, I think, but caves are highly sensitive to disturbance. Human behavior, I've seen this so many times now, really affects caves. People like to just, for safety or for other reasons, they seal off sinkholes and caves to prevent people, their cattle from getting in, their horses from falling in. There's a lot of overuse of caves, mining, just from visitations. Sedimentation is a huge problem where you have these sinkholes right up against farm fields. Farmers don't want to lose any money, and so they will farm right up to that sinkhole. They don't want to leave a vegetative buffer at all. And then you just see the soil deposited into there, and it will cover. You can be in 3-4 feet of soil when you're walking through the cave. You can't even see the bottom of it, and that's totally disturbing any sort of wildlife or any kind of life from being able to use it. And then we see this all the time too. We have a program to help remove trash out of caves because people use them as dumping grounds for tires, for refrigerators, you name it. We've seen it all. But we've seen some seriously degraded caves, more than I can count. On the bright side, though, we have a really amazing cave conservation community in Missouri. So you'll probably recognize some of those partners on the bottom. So Missouri Caves and Karst Conservancy is a really big one. UMSL, because of our connection to Mickey and his students that are always out with us doing work. Cave Research Foundation is a major partner. The St. Louis Zoo has recently become really active with us, and they are actually going to try to breed that fish I showed you that has no eyes and sometimes has eyes. They're going to try to keep them at the St. Louis Zoo, where there's a lot of permitting that goes into holding an endangered species that I'm working through. But they're going to have them, and we're going to be able to figure out like how fast they grow, how old they are when they die, like all this like basic life history we don't know anything about. And then there's other universities, obviously MDC. And so they do a lot of mapping, cave restoration, protecting caves, like putting conservation easements. If it has like a really strong value, then we'll try to buy it as long as the the private landowner is willing. We can never take caves from somebody who doesn't want to assist. That's like a major misconception about the Fish and Wildlife Service. We cannot take property from people. They have to be, we pay like market value, whatever you would get for that land. And if you're willing to sell it to us, we will take it. We cannot force you to do it. There's a lot of research, education, and of course, like just spelunking. That's a funny word to me because it's like recreational caving. I've never done it. I'm always in there for some, research reason or monitoring reason. But there's a lot of people in Missouri that are spelunkers. So just quick, I'm almost done, but I wanted to come back to that Sedalis Nature Preserve in Hannibal, Missouri that I told you about earlier, that mine. This is a place that has over 250,000 endangered bats that hibernate in this place. This is such a cool project. We found those bats not even that long ago. It was 10 years ago. We just had a 10-year celebration in Hannibal, Missouri for Earth Day. And somebody found them. Like, they went into the mine. They remembered that as a child. They remembered that bats were there, and they came back and they found this like highly endangered bat in this mine. And this is an example of where we approached the landowner and we said, do you want to sell this mine? You're not really doing anything with it. It's an abandoned mine. It's a historic place. Like, people were just ATVing in and out of there. And so they were willing to sell it to us. So we used mitigation funding to buy it. And then we donated it back to the city of Hannibal. And they've done so many cool things with this place. They set up trails. They have like 5K runs to there regularly. There's biking trails. There's hiking paths. And so it's a really cool example of endangered species coexisting with people, where it's gated, so people can't get in. Like, you can kind of see it in here, that like in the middle picture, there's a gate there, so people can't get over. But right outside of that, where I'm standing in this picture, there's hiking trails, and the community cares about this place so deeply that when they see people trying to break in, they call us. They call the city of Hannibal Police Department, and they're constantly reporting, oh, we see, teenagers trying to jump over the gate, and then we have to send somebody out. It's a whole thing. But it's just like the coolest partnership, where like, don't close it off, right? Like, incorporate the community into it, and they care, and it's worked beautifully. This is kind of just a fun thing I wanted to show you. How the heck do you count 250,000 bats in a mine? How can you tell whether those populations are increasing, stable, decreasing? We go in every 2 years and take pictures of all the clusters of bats. So this is a cluster right here on the left-hand side. Those are all little noses, those little pink things, the little tiny noses. We take pictures of every single cluster, and then people use the software to mark those little dots on their noses, and that counts the number of bats in that photo. This was my first job at MDC when I was in graduate school. And I kid you not, like, I would close my eyes at night and I would still see those dots, like, all the time. It was really crazy. But yeah, so this year we counted over, so this is an old slide. So there was 220,000 in it 2 years ago, but this year the bats in there are doing great. There's over 250,000 of them. And this is just a fun example showing you one bat that's what is it called? Leucistic, right? That where they don't have any color. So it's the same as these other bats, but it doesn't have any pigmentation. I'll skip that slide. So this is just another fun slide to show you guys. Because I'm the gray bat recovery coordinator, and this is the species that's doing really, really well. There's over 5 million of them. It was my job to figure out and prove that they're doing really well, that they're doing well enough to be taken off the endangered species list. But I couldn't figure out how to prove it because there's over 5 million of them and I can't count them. And so we developed, so I partnered up with a university, and we developed a software that can count bats coming out of caves. And so every time, so these are just 4 examples of 4 different settings where gray bats are coming out of the cave. And you basically create like a line across the screen once you have taken the thermal video, and it's counting the bats that pass through that square. And so it can count bats coming in, it can count bats coming out, because like if you see on the left-hand side here, some are coming out, but some are going in. And so it's doing all that math. And using that, we're able to show that these populations are stable and that they're doing really well. That's part of the way we did it anyway. We still count some of those populations that are hibernating. So this is just another example showing you like how it's actually detecting. It's picking up the pixels. It's like a dark pixel against a lighter background, and it can pick them up. And from that, it's using it to count them. Isn't that fun? Okay. Also just wanted to mention, like, we recently bought some properties. These don't look like anything. They look like little tiny holes in the ground. They don't even look important, but these are openings, 2 openings to, well, one of them, especially in the left one, is an opening to that endangered fish that I showed you that's blind. That's an opening to one of the 5 cave systems in the whole world. And so we recently protected that and bought it from a landowner that approached us and said, hey, I'm like, he's not doing health-wise. But he was like, I don't have any children. I don't know. I don't want this land to be developed into a subdivision. I would like to protect it to make sure the sculpin are taken care of. And so we paid regular value, like per acre of this piece of land, and we bought it, and then we gave it away to a land trust to manage. This is an example of what those like restoration projects can look like. So on the left, you can see all the tires that people have dumped into grandpa's hole. Like, not a great name for a place, but it's like, you can I don't want to know the origin of that story, but it's, you know, you can see all the tires that have been put in there, and then you can see the you know, in the middle of it, people were hauling so much trash out of there, and then you kind of see it doesn't look exciting in that moment, but as soon as they were done, that picture was taken of all the trash they had removed. And we have a bunch of projects like that happening. It's just amazing. These people are a lot of times they're volunteers, just like you guys are, who are coming out and assisting. So if you guys are ever interested in anything like that, let me know. So if you like caves, if you're interested in this type of work, or just getting involved, whether it's like research or surveys or cleanups, whatever, you can reach out to your local cave grotto. So in St. Louis, that's the Merrimack Valley Grotto, the Middle of Mississippi, you have 3. You can also reach out to the Department of Conservation. Shelley Kolotsky is the ecologist for the state. And Cave Research Foundation is another great organization that does a lot of work and gets a lot of people involved, especially in like cave mapping, which I don't love, but so it's for some people. Or just go visit a show cave, you know, like there's so many cool formations, so much cool stuff to see. And there's a lot of them. So this is a map on the right-hand side showing you all the different show caves in Missouri that you can go visit. And that's it. Hopefully I didn't go, well, I went a little over. Sorry, guys. Feel free, if you have any questions, to contact me. That's my email address. I'm happy to chat with you guys anytime.
Okay, anybody have questions? We have a mic for you. Yep. It's yours.
I have a question about disinfecting. I know you said boil clothes or spray with isopropyl. Is it safe for boots? Just like spray them with alcohol? Is that the best way?
Yeah, especially like rubber boots, you can't really boil them, you know. So what we do is we just take either we take all kinds of wipes, like regular Lysol wipes, and we just really, first you wash them, right? Like you could take all the mud off, get all that dirt off, and then whatever's left over, you can put ISO on it. We have like sprayers that we use, but you can use wipes, or you can like dunk them into it to keep anything off. Yep.
I know you were talking a lot about the caves, obviously, that's where they live, but I have bats in my trees, in my yard. Is there any urban bat studies going on?
No studies in Missouri right now. the most common, the most likely culprit would be the big brown bat. So they're like a kind of a meteor, like nice muscular bat. They're brown and they're big. They're called big brown bat. And they love they're highly adapted to living in houses, any sort of right under shutters of windows, like any sort of like urban crevice area they can get into. Attics, they love attics. So there's lots of those. We get calls constantly in our office about people like, help us, please. We have bats in our houses. I'm like, big brown bats. But it's great. Like a lot of times people ask me like, what can I do for bats? Should I put up a bat house? And a lot of times those people live in the woods. And I'm like, well, if you live in the woods already, they probably have places to go roost. They probably have dead standing trees or something to go to. My answer is different for urban settings where habitat is really limited. And so if you want to still attract bats into urban settings other than your house, it is a good idea to put up a bat house, but you want to be careful how you do it, because if you put it on the side of on a tree, especially on a tree, raccoons can get there, snakes can get there, other cats sometimes can get there. And so they will just come in and they will swipe the young out and eat them. And so bat houses really need to be put on in places where other predators can't get to them. So on like metal poles that are too slippery.
So question, if I could, about two things. One, do bats really do much in the way of pollination? And secondly, I'm doing some bioacoustic monitoring of bats. I'm curious about the software that you use to count bats.
Yeah. In the United States, in Missouri, there are no bats that pollinate flowers or that are pollinators. In other parts of the country, like Texas and just like the general Southwest, yes, they are a big pollinator. And so agave being one of them. So yes, they are massive pollinators, very important pollinators, but not in Missouri. And then if you're doing surveys for bats using bat detectors, and you're planning to run them through the software that, tells you what the species are, generally it works, like especially for common species, it works very well. It makes mistakes because not necessarily because it's bad, but because there's a lot of overlap in the call repertoire of bats, just like with warblers, like they're really hard to tell apart. I don't know how well like some of these apps do at warblers. Maybe they do really well, but at least in bats, what bats do, like they're using echolocation to find food and to avoid colliding with objects. And they're doing it the same exact way. And so when they're echolocating, they're producing the same type of signal as other bats. Not all of them, but some of them, especially like in groups, like mouse-ear bats. And so there is certainly going to be mistakes, and you just have to accept that if that's what you want to do and just use the software. There's people like myself who will sit there and visually review calls, and go through them manually and make decisions about, do I accept this classification, or does this fall in that overlap zone where you really shouldn't be so confident? And so it's a complicated topic, but I do think generally it works. In general, it works.
No, I'm sorry, I want to clarify the question. So the question was not the bioacoustics, but I saw that you were taking, looks like infrared pictures of bats in our software to count what they're thinking.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, that was my apologies.
So what was your question specifically about the thermal?
You looked like you were using maybe infrared technology to count the bats as they came out. It would light them up, and then you had software that count them. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's
It's called. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, I misunderstood. We developed it. We wrote a paper on it. It's published. It's free. We did just recently find an error. Like we know how to improve it. And so the collaborator I work with, her name is Laura. She's working on fixing it. So I don't know if you could download it off of the website right now, but if you just look up bat count, we went with an easy name. You can download it for free and use it to run it on. We haven't tested it on like other species, but I bet it would work on like ducks and other things too.
I've got a question on that cave in the Hannibal area.
Yeah,
And I know when the wind farms were built near Kirksville,
yeah,
there was a concern that the Indiana bats would be moving west out of Hannibal to maternal trees that would put them in danger from the wind farms. And I know the Missouri Department of Conservation has tried a variety of tactics to reduce that problem. Do you know what the latest is and what the actual impact is?
yeah, yeah, I do. Because our office permitted that project. So so wind energy is like such a tricky topic because people think of it as like green, right? And like beneficial, but in one way where it's really harmful is bats. It kills so many bats. It kills a lot more bats than birds. It has killed endangered species. It has killed lots of bats. And what we've done with them is we've given them a permit where they can only kill a certain number, where we don't think it's going to affect the population, like the overall population. And so they are required to go beneath the turbines multiple times per week and be constantly looking. Sometimes they use dogs to do that. There's like all these different methods you can use. And they have to search for dead bats. And when they find a certain number, at that point, like they have to either shut down a facility, like they've reached that limit that they can take for the year, or they have to do these like crazy cut-in speeds where they are only allowed to function when it's so windy, which is beneficial to them. But when bats are really unlikely to be flying because it's too windy, they're tiny, right? Like they can't handle like 20-mile-per-hour winds. And so it's a little bit of compromise. Like we know they're going to kill some, but not very many. And so that's like the permit. They have a permit that allows them to do that and requires them to be constantly checking. Now, there are places where there are no listed species where we have no handle on that, and we can't even make recommendations for what people like they do. So there's a lot of bats being killed in Texas, especially Mexican free-tailed bats. I mean, they're decimated, and these wind facilities do not care. They are not doing anything above or beyond. They're not doing any monitoring, and we have no idea what's going on because we have no regulatory way of requiring that.
One quick follow-up. I was told by somebody from MDC that they had sound equipment where at the wind turbines that could pick up bat noise, and if they pick up bat noise, and then they slow down the blades. Is that true or not?
I don't know which facility. So I try to stay out of the wind world as much as I can. It's such a depressing field to me that I try not to. I try to stay away. So there's another biologist in my office whose job is specifically energy. That's renewable energy, oil and gas. So she would know more. But yeah, lots of things have been tried to see if they will work. Thermal cameras, like what you saw, like being able to pick up bats at night, and if they are within like the zone of the turbine, then it will trigger the turbine to shut off, which takes about a minute. So that bat's probably not gonna could get killed, but at least additional bats that may be coming through, especially if they're migrating right after, wouldn't. So there's definitely like limitations on like time of year when they shouldn't be active and cut-in speeds. But yeah, I mean, the reality is like nobody has found anything that's like super effective at limiting take. It's called take when you kill an endangered species, using these methods. Like people have tried like lights, sounds, like put like whistles almost. They're kind of like whistle looking things at the end of the blade, so that as they're spinning, they're creating high frequency sounds that are above our hearing range, but bats can hear them. People have tried so many things, and so far the best thing that I'm aware of anyway, and I'm not 100% sure that's true, but like fairly confident, is just it's like having really high cut-in speeds, because bats are mostly active when air is like, it's not very windy, and then up to about 9 miles per hour, they're active, and then after that it's too windy. And so if if you don't have the turbines, they're not generating a lot of energy anyway when it's not windy. So basically waiting until those windy days, windy nights. So they're active during the day, and then they're only active at night when it's really windy. That seems to be the best way.
I have a question about the water quality in the cave and whether that pollution would impact the residents that are there, the agricultural seepage, the seepage from the urban environments. Does that impact
Yeah.
the residents that are there?
Yeah. Where I just put in for a grant, I think I'm going to get it, waiting to find out, but it's a really big grant that's going to be doing a lot of water quality testing in Perry County, right above the cave systems where that blind fish lives. And so we are looking to see, I'm trying to get the farmers above to tell me what they're actually putting on their fields so we can test to see how much residue is actually getting in through the systems. And then knowing like the next step is like actually being able to link that to whether it's harmful, right? Because like just because it's there, if it's flushing through really quickly and only once in a while, maybe they can tolerate that. But if you have to like continue it application or like really high loads of it, because this is all assuming that they're applying insecticides or pesticides to like whatever the bottles say, because it's not regulated. So they're just being told to apply, as much as what the manufacturing bottle says. So we will be doing lots of work to see whether that's actually happening. We're also doing a lot of E. coli testing where we're getting not just to the E. coli level, but like figuring out the source. So we're having university in Springfield do testing to figure out whether it's bovine or human. That way, if it's human, we can actually address the septic tank problems above it. There's still some houses that are not connected to the city line. And so we would fund them getting like these really old septic tanks and replace them or get them hooked up to the line in the city of Perryville. So yeah, we definitely know that those streams are impaired. But like to the degree to which they're impaired for some of these things is like what we're going after next. But in general, caves, yeah, like there's almost like no way that it's not affecting cave life, especially because this is a problem for me, like, because I try to work with NRCS because they fund a lot of these farmers and subsidize a lot of what's being put on the ground, but they don't require them to have vegetated buffers or any sort of significant vegetative buffers around sinkholes that are emptying water or conduits into the cave systems.
I don't know on that. She was not going to speak about it.
So I have a question about trees. I heard recently they're not supposed to cut down trees in the warm months because bats could be roosting in them. And I was wondering if you could clarify, does it matter if the tree is dead or alive? And also what months of the year those are?
Yeah, it depends. The answer depends. Like if you're in the city, so we regulate endangered species. And so if a big brown is in a tree, we don't, even though it hurts my heart, like I don't want it to happen, but we don't have any regulatory power to tell somebody you can't kill them. And so like if you're in an urban setting, these endangered species that I've been talking about do not live in urban settings. They are in like more wilderness type areas. And so there we can tell land developers and people like, hey, we want you to avoid clearing trees during the active season when bats have left the caves and are now in trees. And that season, the active season is April 1 until October 15th. But if you're in the city and you're clearing like a neighborhood tree that's really unlikely to be occupied, we're not going to tell you you can't do that. And even when we say you can't do that, we just say like, hey, it's possible that if you're going to be clearing a 300-acre lot to put in a subdivision, you should do a bat survey to figure out whether you have endangered species present. And if you have, then we're going to give you recommendations and we'll offer you like ways to mitigate for that. And we'll work with them to do that. But if they don't find endangered species during that survey, they do not have to abide by tree clearing restrictions. They can clear trees any time of year.
Yes, I was wondering what the risk for human health is in relationship to the toxicity of the water you were talking about earlier? How does that then later affect humans? Does it affect the bat population to make any worse, harmful, adverse effect for human health?
You mean like when people are like dumping things into the cave systems, or what specifically do you mean?
The quality of the water? Does it end up
Oh.
going back out into the environment nearby?
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
then
yeah. 100%. Like caves don't, and usually they don't, like, you might have a losing stream, that it's a cave system, but oftentimes there's a spring that comes out and that water is continuing into some sort of above ground stream. And the way we were able to work with Perryville, with the city of Perryville, is that we told them, like, you have this endangered species, it's underneath all these agricultural fields. They really didn't want us to create a critical habitat, which is like, if we list like designated area as critical habitat for a species, it makes it more restrictive for what they can do and cannot do in that area, because we're like, it only exists in these 5 cave systems. So we have to be very careful. But the city of Perryville really didn't want that designation. So they pitched it to all their residents as a human health benefit, that we are improving the quality of our water for ourselves and tangentially for a fish. And so they did all this work, like these cleanups where they had like contaminants cleanups. They were asking people like, stop dumping in sinkholes, bring your waste containers here, we'll dispose of it for free. They installed all sorts of structures like these standpipes to prevent sedimentation and all kinds of things from running into these streams. And so they did that on their own using their own money. They didn't get any money from us. But like the messaging was very much based on like human impacts, because there's deer, like there's a lot of hunters in Perryville and Perry County. And so those animals are drinking water out of those streams. And so they just kept tying it back to how it's benefiting the community.
Thank you so much. I think we're gonna have to move on to our business meeting. I think we could talk to you for a few more hours, but we want to respect your time, and we just want to again say thank you so much. This was so interesting.
Pleasure to hang out with you guys. Sorry I can't see your faces. But yeah, holler. Hopefully we'll cross paths at some point in the future. Nice to meet you guys. Have a great night.